We are back in session, ladies and gentlemen, and I would like to start our deliberations, but before we do, I would like Commissioner Atkinson to read a statement.
Thank you, Chair Finley. In an abundance of caution, I am announcing that I may have a potential conflict of interest due to the fact that my husband is the Conservation Director for Oregon Hunters Association. And because I understand this may contribute to an appearance of impropriety.
All right.
Can I follow up with that just for a sec? I know we're trying to get into it. So, I've worked in government over the past 40 years, and so folks that work in government have to be very careful about not just conflict of interest in the letter of the law, but also the appearance of conflict of interest. And conflict of interest as it is defined, as our council defined it, it is not occurring. I personally, this is personal, I have the utmost confidence and respect for Commissioner Atkinson's professionalism, her reputation as a researcher, and her invaluable contribution to this commission. And I am personally sad that she's going off the commission. And with that said, again, having worked in government many years, there is public perception as well. I'll just give a very quick example that I've given before, and then we'll get right into it. So I've worked in city government, for instance, and there was an instance where a former mayor was at a Blazer game, and he was sitting kind of in the middle section, kind of, and he saw a colleague, friend, member of the public who was down, kind of sitting closer to the front row. So he, kind of waved, went down and kind of chatted a little bit, but then halftime was over and it was the third quarter, and so he just sat there for a while and talked. And then a member of the public called our city commissioners and said the mayor is taking advantage of his office by having a better seat at the Blazer game, okay? So we didn't have any rules, statutes, laws about where the mayor can sit at a basketball game. But it was just a little slip of his that he didn't get back to his seat because he got into a conversation. And the public noticed that and they called him in. I don't personally think that was an egregious offense, but it just comes back again to public perception and the things that we have to be careful of. So I appreciate Commissioner Atkinson reading her statement. And I personally don't feel that her professionalism and her integrity is compromised by rules that her husband has. But again, as public officials, we have to be careful of our actions and how we're perceived. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you. All right. Commissioner Biddle.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt Addendum 1 to Exhibit H for the Oregon Wolf Conservation and Management Plan.
Okay.
I second that.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Let's discuss the issue. You all have Addendum 1. Is there any further discussion, commissioners? Yes, Mary.
As I said earlier, I think that Addendum 1 describes the situation that exists, and so in the plan we would have a description of the what exists and what would happen in order to have controlled take, or I don't think we say controlled hunt here. So controlled take and then controlled hunt is a subset of that. So if we say controlled take, we would have covered both. But as I said earlier, I think this is an accurate statement that the commission would need to approve a process in order to do this. And so I would, when we get to the vote, I will vote no, not because it's not accurate, but because I think it puts us further away from the conversation about whether controlled take should be in the plan or not. So.
Okay. All right. Seeing no further discussion, I'm going to call the question. All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
No.
You too, Greg?
No, I feel that controlled take should not be a part of this plan. I think we need to have some wording that says that at some point in the future, controlled take could be a consideration. But I feel that it is, the way it's worded now, it's such a contention and will continue to cause us a lot of conflict down the line. You know, I feel that's problematic. I don't feel that we have to have unanimous vote on that. I feel that as a commission, at any point down the line, if we feel that there is a rash of chronic depredation, or the wolf, the rogue pack just goes wild, you know, we can have a special session and we can decide that control take will happen. But I think having it's such an issue of having it in the plan at this point, even though it could be used in the future, I'm just looking at the longer view of relationships and being able to work with all of our stakeholder groups in the future. And I think that's a bigger picture. And
Okay, so are you voting yes or no?
I'm voting no.
Okay. So we have 2 noes and 5 yeses.
Is that correct, that we had 2 no's? It's sometimes
Yes.
hard to hear. Okay.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
you
All
do
right.
have a
So the
second no.
motion
Yeah,
carries.
yes.
So that's adopted. Okay, Commissioner Buckmaster.
Yes, Chair, I would like to make a motion for an amendment to change on page 106 of the draft Wolf Plan update, Appendix A, Glossary of Terms, under the definition for controlled take, that it be changed to read, Commission-approved action for wolf population management that allows the take of a wolf by special permit on public or private lands to address long-term recurring wolf livestock conflicts, ungulate population objectives, or winter range or feeding area objectives. We are striking the words members of the public or tribes to kill.
All right. So it says what but not who, and leaves that to a future commission process, correct?
And yes, it leaves in the special, that they would have to have a special permit issued by ODFW staff.
And it's a commission process.
That's correct.
Okay.
Could you say again what the language is? What your,
Existing or proposed?
how you would propose to have this read?
Under controlled take, it would read, Commission-approved action for wolf population management that allows the take of a wolf by special permit on parentheses, on public or private lands, parentheses, to address long-term recurring wolf livestock conflicts, ungulate population objectives, or winter range or feeding area objectives.
Okay, I'll second the motion. So further discussion.
So we still don't know who these people are.
That's for the commission to decide.
So the concern that's been put on the table is about non-ODF&W staff in general. And so I understand that our staff alone may not have that capacity. And I've learned just from this morning's session, we didn't get our 5 wolf biologists, we only got 3 in the budget. So that does diminish our capacity. But it's still not, it's not addressing the concerns of the majority of people that we hear from, and it's still vague. Because the director could still appoint anybody. I trust our director and his ability to make selections that are effective and professional and accurate. But again, there's language that is still.
It says the
that's
commission.
That's still
Greg.
inflammatory, excuse me.
It says the commission. Doesn't say the director.
Okay. What, okay.
Commission-approved action.
Okay.
Okay, Holly.
I'd like to hear from staff what this means and how they interpret it and what their thoughts are.
Chair Finley, Commissioner Atkinson, Commissioner Woolley, thank you for that question. We were debating on whether we could provide clarity at that moment or not. I'll see if Derek wants to add anything. In hearing Commissioner Woolley's thought process, if you look at the definition of controlled take and then you look at the definition of lethal take, a couple of terms down in the glossary, I just want it to be clear, lethal take is defined as the management actions of ODF and W staff, mainly at the direction of the director, so that we're very clear that controlled take is defined as something else. And that's all I wanted to make sure was very clear, because we talk how much misunderstanding there is over the use of words in these. Go ahead, Derek.
Oh, no, I agree. Yes, the words are maddening.
So the language as proposed, it keeps the door open for pretty much anybody to be designated to be able to kill a wolf. Is that correct?
No, it says the commission. It's a commission action. That's not anybody. We would set the qualifications and requirements. Not us, a future commission.
A commission-approved action.
Commission approved. All right.
The commission could approve anyone outside of ODF and W, potentially.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's the role of the commission. All right, so any other further
Could I ask just a question
ahead,
on this
Commissioner
one,
Wall.
just for clarification? I understand the part about this now says the commission would approve or not approve if they wanted to. But I also understood from the deputy director that what this means is that by putting, that we have distinguished controlled take in this case from lethal take, because lethal take is killing by the ODF and W staff or its agent, and controlled take is by definition killing by somebody else. And so, is that accurate?
Chair Finley, Commissioner Wall, I think one of the discrepancies there, the differences there is that lethal take is approved by the director. This is more of the agency's day-to-day response that does not require a separate commission process. And correct me if I'm wrong, by the approval of Addendum 1, that indeed is showing that controlled take is by a separate commission process. So that's kind of the difference is lethal take is the wildlife agency doing what it does, what it needs to do with direction of the director. Controlled take is, who knows, still could be the commission direction is staff still taking the action, but that's commission directed, not director directed.
It's of some concern to me, I have to say, that I'm not sure when I walk out of this room at the end of the day, I will be able to turn around and describe this to somebody else, exactly what we just did, if we do what we may be about to do. This should be simpler. You know, this is a pretty simple, or it should be a pretty simple thing to do. And so this one feels like, I'm not sure I could describe it, so so what we're doing is saying that
We're requiring any action taken in controlled take, any action taken in controlled take to be approved by the commission, whatever commission it is, this one or a future one. So it elevates the protection, it elevates the public participation.
It creates a special permit.
Yeah.
I mean, it has several layers of protection in there and discussion, but does not preclude.
So it's fine that this is required, this can only be approved by the commission. I understand that. It leaves the door open for any future commission to appoint all the list of folks that are a concern. So for instance, there's been a lot of concern about the role of wildlife services. This keeps the door open for a future commission to appoint wildlife services to either make a judgment in the field about a wolf kill or to go out and kill a wolf at the direction of the commission. So
Greg, you cannot bind a future commission. We have no authority to bind a future commission. You just like the state legislature can't bind a future legislature. So you haven't left the door open. I mean, the door is always open for a future commission to change things. We've done it,
Right, and we can change things today.
right. But there's nothing we can do that prevents a future commission from taking lawful action under their authority.
I'm not arguing that point.
Well, what are you arguing?
What I'm arguing for is that leaving the door open with this language for a future commission, where we've heard time and time and time again about the concerns of a wide range of folks being able to kill wolves, whether the commission authorizes it or not. And we'll have Wildlife Services as an example. I don't doubt the ability, the professional ability of Wildlife Services to be able to make a call out in the field, or their ability to identify a wolf and kill a specific wolf that's been depredating. My concern is an inherent conflict of interest of Wildlife Services, because Wildlife Services exists to kill animals. It's their mission. And so I feel that there's an inherent conflict of interest to have Wildlife Services out there killing wolves. They're called to kill any kind of varmint. It could be the raccoon den in the barn or whatever it is. I mean, it's their role, it's their purpose, it's what they're designated to do by the Department of Agriculture. But it also keeps them in business, and it keeps their people employed, and it keeps their agency afloat. And so I feel that that is a conflict of interest. And so, with this designation, they're also on the list, along with local hunters, along with sheriffs, along with anybody that has an interest in killing a wolf that can fill out a permit and qualify, that they can go and do it. And so that's my concern. It's not about the commission having authority and making a decision in the future or trying to bind them. It's about who's involved with it.
There's no reference to Wildlife Services in this. It's not in there. This isn't a discussion about Wildlife Services.
Wildlife Services is mentioned numerous times in the plan. I'm looking at it right now.
Well, not under the definition of controlled taking. And if it is, we'll purge the language to make it consistent with whatever we pass.
Wolf depredation on livestock may be confirmed by either ODFW or Wildlife Services. That's in this plan. I'll give you the page number, I'll give you the second.
No, I've read it.
We thought we were talking about controlled take.
We're talking about controlled take.
Yeah, we are, and we're also talking about phase 3, aren't we?
We're talking about the definition of controlled take,
Okay.
and that's what was proposed to be amended.
Mm-hmm.
Has nothing to do with Wildlife Services.
Well, Wildlife Services is still, okay, we can get past the controlled take part, and we're still dealing with Wildlife Services.
How?
It's a future amendment, you're saying?
I'm saying it's another part of the plan that needs to be changed.
Well, maybe so. So you can make a motion to that effect with that language. Right now, we have a motion and a second on the floor. I'm going to call the, more discussion? Pardon? Yeah. Yeah, I made the second. It's motion by Buckmaster and seconded by me. Okay, Holly?
I just wanted to say that personally, I think the less we change the plan, the less complicated it is. We don't really always know the effect of our actions. And since this language is following from previous plans, I would like to just see it stay as it is written.
I mean, you're speaking in opposition to the motion?
I don't see that there's any clarity by removing the terms members of the public or tribes.
I'll let Commissioner Buckmaster speak to what he's trying to do with the language.
I think as we distill a number of the arguments we've heard and testimony we've heard today to their most basic element, that argument against the public involvement in wolf removal centers around the idea that public hunters can't be trusted. I mean, that's what we've heard.
Yep.
And while I disagree with that as a general statement, I certainly understand that there are individuals that can't be trusted. So in order to at least remove the idea that we are opening this up to a general public by using that word which denotes a greater number than the few that would be used under a controlled take situation. And trusting that our staff, if needed, will select competent professional people to help them do what they've decided has to be done under controlled take. I think this language gives them the authority to do what has to be done, but takes away a buzzword or a hot button word that I don't think needs to be in there, because we're never going to be looking at a widespread. We've already dealt with the idea of a general season. We're not going to have that, and we've taken out just the idea of the public at large. So it doesn't address Commissioner Woolley's concern over wildlife services. I think that we can look at that, but I think the language change is warranted.
Okay, I understand your focus. I guess since it means the same to me, then I would be fine with
Okay,
voting for it.
all right. Any further discussion? Okay, I'm going to call the question. All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay,
No.
so it's 6 votes for,
5 to 2.
5. We have 2 against?
Commissioner Woolley, you voted no, correct?
I voted no, that's correct.
Okay, all right, 5 to 2. All right. Moving on.
Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Buckmaster?
I would like to offer a amendment addressing attachment 3, page 38 of the Oregon Wolf Conservation and Management Plan that refers to non-lethal measures, and replace the entire sentence on line 22, which,
What page are you on?
page 38.
Line 22 is the website thing.
That's correct. So, and now I'm finding it as well. Yeah, we have it written down here. The current wording is, where am I? Okay. The current wording on on line 22 is additional information about these measures can be viewed at, colon, and then the hyperlink to the non-lethal methods. This amendment would replace that sentence, that line 22, with a text to better outline the importance and access the information on the non-lethal tools to address wolf livestock conflict. And it would read, ODFW maintains an actively managed document that addresses the current status of, quote, ODFW non-lethal measures to minimize wolf livestock conflict, unquote, period. That document and additional information on non-lethal measures can be viewed at line 23, or what that would end up being. The next line would have the hyperlink.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion. We
I
have a-
second it.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Buckmaster and seconded by Commissioner Akinson. Now, let's have some further discussion. Bruce, what's your intent behind this?
As we heard in some testimony, and as I experienced and voiced at our conference call a couple weeks ago, as I read in the plan, the non-lethal, it was somewhat vague. It referenced a number of different studies, and certain measures were partially effective, not effective, but it didn't go into any great detail. I wanted more detail. I even asked for the potential of having a table which showed where things were used, where non-lethal were used, where they were effective, who did the work, et cetera, et cetera. Staff came back to me after that meeting and said, you know, since the plan is in in rule, and this is an actively managed document. First, they referenced me to the website, the hyperlink that is currently on the draft plan. I read that. It was a 7 or 8 page. I think Derek did a little more work to it and expanded it to 10 pages just to prove to me he was doing something. And 1 page?
No, just this once.
Just this once. And came back, and it was an excellent document, but I felt that we wanted to, people looking at the Wolf document, looking at non-lethal, focusing on that, really needed to be directed to understand the importance that it's actively managed. We don't put it in the plan because it doesn't take rule to change it at that point. So this just highlights that A, it exists, B, how to get to it, and defines what it is as an actively managed, adaptive management type document. And hopefully it will get a great deal of use.
Okay. So we have a further discussion on this motion? Okay, I'm going to call the question then. All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, it passes unanimously by the commissioners present. Now, in our round robin up here, Commissioner Buckmaster talked about a pilot project to be established for non-lethal.
And I think that was first broached by Commissioner Woolley, and I think my sense is we're pretty much on the same page on that, and so I'll take a break from talking too much and let Greg
Well,
tell you
Greg,
what he
do
thinks.
you want to think about it and put it in the form of a motion that we instruct the department to establish a formal pilot project on non-lethal?
Do you think it requires a motion or just an instruction? How do you?
Well, I would like to see an insertion, I could write up language for it, but an insertion in the plan under the section that discusses existing non-lethal methods, as a consideration for an increase in departmental involvement. And, we can work the wording out for that, but I just don't think it should be omitted altogether. Again, because of the terrific attendance by ranchers around the state and the great interest in this. And, we can address the details later, from a funding perspective, but I think just kind of an earmark in the plan so that it's not omitted altogether, I think should be important. I don't think it necessarily requires a motion.
I'm going to ask our deputy director to comment and maybe make a commitment and maybe not. Depends on the budget and positions.
Chair Finley, Commissioner Woolley, thank you for that. We could do one of 2 things here, and I'll give a little bit of background before I describe those choices that you all can make. We did discuss ODF&W partnering with other entities for those meetings, and as you have expressed, those have occurred a few times across the state, and we will continue to do that. In addition to that, there was talk of a chronic depredation plan and working with landowners on their own non-lethal deterrence plans. Those conversations indicated that you would need to develop those resources, which you just mentioned, a position at a minimum to kind of coordinate that across the state. So where we're at is we could draft up a motion very quick that says the department will work on finding the resources to do those types of things. Or we can continue the efforts with the resources we have and potentially look at, through the EBAC process, working with partners and developing a POP that would go through the process to get into our budget to have that position and start.
Okay. Commissioner Aikenson.
One comment I have on that is we do have to have some volunteer interest by livestock producers that want to be involved in the program. So I think from the start, that would be the first step, would be to see what kind of engagement the livestock community wants in that and how they envision something, because it doesn't do ODFW any good to have a pilot project with no participants.
I agree, and I think that should be included as a caveat within the mention of this. So in other words, it's not a commitment, obviously, because we don't have funding for it. But again, just like we're mentioning the potential for controlled take in the future, we haven't made a commitment for it, but it's still in the plan. So we could write, I know you're a great authorship there, Deputy Director.
Thank you.
So just give me a show of your hands. Are you comfortable with our Deputy Director's description of working in the future for a POP but continuing to look for partnerships in the agricultural community with an emphasis that we want an emphasis to improve the use of non-lethal take and working on technological transfer within the ranching community and the farming community of those that work and advocating new techniques in non-lethal control. Commissioner Biddle.
I do, I support it.
Okay, let me see all your hands. Okay.
May
All
I
right,
add
that's
one
the
thing?
sense of the commission.
I have a comment from Commissioner
Mary,
Wall.
would you like to say
Yeah.
something?
I do support that idea a lot. I think that's where we should put our emphasis, but I think that it shouldn't be just the ranchers and farmers that are involved in this, but we have a lot of other stakeholders. This is a way to build some kind of bridge among all of our groups, so it shouldn't be just the ranchers.
We'll just include that into this sense of the commission, okay?
Maybe to reassure Commissioner Wall, a lot of my thoughts about this came from the Center for Biological Diversity's letter, which was excellent as far as expounding on work that had been done, and my rather lengthy discussion with Ms. Stone. And it was the idea that we could work. Her fear was that work she was doing and had been initiated and they were doing in other states, because we would approve a plan and didn't have a mechanism for moving forward, would just stop. And that seemed like a travesty to me, and so this is an effort to make that move forward, and I'm fully supportive.
Okay. All right, so we all understand the sense of the commission and we're all agreed. Okay? Thank you. All right. Moving on. Let's discuss the definition or the prescription of chronic predation. Currently, the plan talks about 2 in 9. I think 2 and 9?
2 and 9 for phases 2 and 3.
Right, for 10, and then 4 and 6 in phase 1.
Yeah, which
Right.
is,
Right.
yes.
And I think you said in your testimony that we had been in practice doing, it's 3 and 9,
3 and 12.
or 3 and 12?
Yeah, I think
Well,
it's
that was Chair Finley, a previous proposal in this process, following staff evaluation of our decision-making in the past, was 3 and 12. Following the facilitated process, the newest proposal from staff is 2 and 9, which is essentially just adding a 9-month time frame onto the current plan.
So let me ask you a question. Understanding that there was a facilitated process and that we were trying to bring the communities together and that were polarized, what number is the best for the wolf?
Chair Finley, I don't know if I can answer the question, the best for the wolf or best for
Well,
decision-making?
best for wolf recovery and wolf management.
Chair Finley, as we heard from Director Melcher in our call, the agency discretion, in my opinion, may be more valuable than those numbers. Because we are evaluating what is indeed best for the wolf in that case. Because when lethal actions are taken, this is not a retaliation. This is an effort to stop depredation. And we even know that that may not be a long-term fix, because wolves can return to that area or situations change over time. So, so long as there's discretion, in my opinion, that is the primary need. Continuing to be evidence-based and collecting information and looking at the big picture is, so long as we're consistently doing that, I think that that is what's best for the wolf. The number can vary. You know, when we made that 3 and 12 proposal, we had never gone lethal at 2, but then we did through this process. Just once though, we've still usually gone at higher levels. So it could be, you know, the staff proposal was the product of this facilitated process, which again was just the proposal being the middle of 2 sides at that time. We didn't get the direct feedback nor arguably full consensus.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get away from, and I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but
So
we've heard a lot of testimony that people weren't comfortable with 2 and 9.
sure, and in many discussions, you know, you look at our glossary and there's certain terms that we have to define that sometimes can vary in their meaning outside of this realm. So chronic is perhaps unfortunate that that is the word that got used when the intent is, what is this threshold of acceptable depredations? And I think that that was indeed the intent of that original use of that language, which now has caused us great harm because we're looking at the chronic Webster's Dictionary definition. In answering your question, I think one of the things I want to focus on is the time frame. So in our facilitated process, we did get consensus that having some sort of relevant time frame, the group agreed on. This concept of grazing season seemed to make sense. But you can ask producers.
So that's the 9 months that you're describing?
Yes.
Okay.
But that can vary across the state. If we were to talk to producers here in Western Oregon, where perhaps you've got sheep out year-round, 12 months is their grazing season, versus other parts of the state, it might be a 6-month period. So arguably a 12-month period is more consistent across the state, but again, our proposal was more of the middle of the road. The 2 or the 3 or 4, certainly there's agency discretion. We even heard from some of the stakeholders that they recognize their proposal was 2 in 12, but they recognize that the state would still operate this discretion. So they knew that 2 may not regularly occur, but they wanted the option there in case there was this situation that really indeed warranted it. From staff perspective, we know that there's trouble with that because once 2's reached, we're still going to see potentially the requests come in and some challenge and pushback and displeasure with our lack of a response. But that's the way we've been doing things, and we feel like we're consistent in how we're evaluating these requests. So we'll still probably continue to likely, even if the number was 2, still probably not respond to a lethal request until 3 or 4 or whatever.
So I'm sitting out in the audience, and I want a number to hold you accountable.
I don't think Derek should be held to that. I saw by your body language, Derek, as soon as that was brought up, there was a lot of squirming there. And I think that's for a reason, because these are just numbers that came up. They're not based on research, they're not based on modeling. They just came up at some point. And I think what we end up with should reflect what has occurred in terms of the numbers of requests for lethal control, which has been hovering around 3. Now, I understand and I sympathize and I think about that rancher who lost 22 sheep in one incident, which is devastating. You know, it's a terrible thing. That's the exception, but it can happen. You know, especially with sheep. You know, they're just very defenseless. But I think there's a lot of, again, consternation around this, and I don't think that we need to create to have another log jam. I see nothing wrong with calling it 3 and 9 months. I mean, that's the middle, to me. And Deputy Director Hearn talked about 2 as being somewhat of a compromise, and I'm not understanding where the other extreme was to put that in the middle. Was there 1 at one point that was proposed so that 2 became a compromise? I'm not sure how that happened. But I think again to get through a difficult point of several points in this process to agree to what I feel is a compromise of 3 depredations in 9 months is reasonable. And getting back to one of the questions, and I know when we were kind of giving you a whole list of stuff and you were writing things down, one of the things that I brought up was this phrase, "in an area." And so I think maybe for the benefit of us, the new commissioners, the audience, what is an area? And as I said, I used to think that at one point we were talking about multiple incidents in one specific location, being one ranch, but we're talking about an area. And so I think that's important to kind of define as well, because it is an area objective, and can an area shift? Can they end up overlapping? So I think that is a factor, as well as the number of depredations and the time frame. Depredations in an area. So if that's something that, and if we have a definition of that, I'd appreciate it.
So Chair Finley, Commissioner Woolley, Derek is obviously looking for something. He will define area of known wolf activity and area of wolf depredation to get you there. I'll comment briefly on the compromise aspect. And, the facilitated work group, we said, is going to be decisions by consensus. It's not going to be a compromise. But when we went in with 3 and 12, we heard from all sides, no one was happy with that, and Derek has indicated that. So knowing that currently we've been operating under a plan that has 2 with no time frame, the compromise is to put a time frame on it, because that to most folks did seem limiting. And that started as 12 and then it went to 9. So that's more of the compromise piece that I'm discussing. I just want to hit on what Derek had said too. For the wolves and the department's management, the discretion is the piece here. And we don't want to set the expectation by moving it 3 and we go in every time and we take the same action, or 2 and we're not probably going to take action until it's case by case basis to such a degree that discretion is absolutely critical here.
Yeah, and I agree. And the discretion needs to be applied, whether it's 2, 3, 4, 6, 9, or 12 months.
So the department in the approved draft that they sent to the commission has 2 and 9. And Greg is comfortable with 3 and 9. I'm comfortable with 3 and 9.
I'm
Molly?
comfortable in 3 and 12.
3 and 12? Kim? Which
Which one?
Well, they weren't happy with 3 and 12 to begin with.
Well, who's they? Neither side was happy with it,
Yeah,
so maybe
exactly.
both sides can settle with it
So
if they don't like
Is 3 and
2
9 better than 3 and 12?
Well, let's settle on the number 3.
Okay.
Can we all do that, and then we'll talk about 9 versus 12? You all agreeable with that?
Yes.
Okay. So Derek, help us now. If we settle on the number 3, we're just having a discussion here. If we settle on the number 3, then what's the impact of 9 versus 12? And you said that the working group was not happy with 12. Was that the consensus?
I don't know if I'd say that the working group wasn't happy with 12, but our original staff proposal of 3 and 12 didn't get accepted.
They didn't like it. Was it the 12 part they didn't like?
Difficult to say.
Okay.
And there's 2 sides.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's 2 sides. That's what I'm trying to get at.
And I would just add that also that the entire working group did not participate all the way through the 3 sessions. And so we're talking about the working group in 2 out of 3, and there was not a completion of that process, and there were also some concerns expressed about the process. So I'm just putting that in as well.
All right. Does someone want to make a motion about changing the number in the definition of chronic take from 2 and 9 to 3 and 9?
I would make that motion.
Consider it made. I'll second it. Okay, now let's continue the discussion. Holly?
I'm opposed to that because that's not close to what the compromise was between the 2 sides. We're only bending toward one side right now, and that was not what the other side wanted. If in fact 9 months represents a grazing season, then effectively for those who want 9 months, 12 months shouldn't make any difference. But in Western Oregon or other situations, 12 months would be a grazing season. So I guess I feel like it's not pushing it as far to go with 12 months as it would be with 9.
Yeah, you've got a good point. Anyone else agree with Holly's point? Yeah.
3 and 12?
Yeah.
No.
Greg, you want to withdraw your motion? And I'll withdraw my second.
Yeah, I would support 3 and 12.
Okay, and I'll second 3 and 12. Let's talk about it.
In the event, in southern Willamette Valley, in the west side, we get into a situation with friends of Commissioner Walls that lose 40 sheep one night, 40 sheep the next night, and they see 3 and 12. And it is my understanding that under particular emergency situations, that the director of the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife can make a determination outside of, I consider it's incredibly unlikely and rare to the point of never, but I want to make sure, I would like to make sure there was some escape valve somewhere in a situation where virtually very few, if any, people would say, oh, that's not a big deal, that we could deal with it. And as long as that authority rests in our director only, I'd just like to know if it's there.
Chair Finley, Commissioner Buckmaster, it is not. Part of our recommendation was to allow for extreme circumstances when we did modify the chronic depredation, and so that was not, again, agreed to as part of the facilitated process, so we didn't recommend it when we brought it forward as well. Do you want to describe what that original proposal was?
Best I can recall, thank you, Chair Finley, Commissioner Buckmaster, yes, in this 3-year process, at one point when we rolled out the proposal of 3 and 12, we did have this caveat for extreme circumstances, which was 2. And if you remember, there wasn't a time frame on it. That caused some issue, but it continued to not get a lot of love. And so for the sake of trying to move forward, that was removed from discussion. And there was a bit of a precedent set that there are conditions for extreme circumstances under phase 1. And that's where we're in some ways trying to replicate that through the other phases. So that's a little bit of the history, but we went through this, down that pathway and made a lot of speed bumps.
Excuse me, so you're telling me we do have that escape valve in phase 1?
The Chair Finley, Commissioner Buckmaster, there is an escape valve, however, the conditions are different. For that situation, there's a handful of criteria, but the primary numbers that you're looking at there are 4 or more confirmed depredation incidents of depredation of livestock by what the department reasonably believes to be the same wolf or wolves within 7 days.
And so that would cover the horrible
My
scenario.
friend on the South
Your
Coast.
friend with those expensive sheep down there. So, and that's in 1, but not in 3 and 4?
Correct.
Or 2 and 3?
Correct.
That's correct.
I would love to see that added to 2 and 3. It doesn't seem like,
How about the rest of you? Shall we work on this a little bit, perfect the language?
I'd personally rather go back to 2 and 9 and move on.
How about the rest of you?
I
Wanna
would
work on
rather-
it?
I prefer 2 and 9 to 3 and 12. I think the more important piece, though, that we're missing in this conversation is that the reason that people become comfortable with either 2 or 3 is that the department has been using a long list of factors and considering this really carefully. And I think that we're losing track of what's important here, and that's it. So to me, it's important to keep it short, and we're one of the people that have, grazing all year, but that's not relevant. What's relevant here, I think, is what do we do to look at these incidents when they happen, and are all of these factors being considered? And I think the answer right now is yes. And so 2 or 3 isn't as important to me as keeping it at 9.
We want to take it now.
I
So,
don't
yeah.
know, we'll have another break.
We're
No, we're
complicating
close.
it.
Let's keep
And-
going.
And I think what Commissioner Atkinson is referring to is that grazing seasons vary from one side of the Cascades to the other. And so having it set at 2 or having it set at 9 or having it set at 12 is not an accurate representation of the needs of producers across the state. And I think that's one of the complicating factors, and I don't know what the answer is to that. I mean, we've bifurcated our wolf status down the line of the state, and, you know, that is sort of working so far. I don't want this to get, I mean, I appreciate you need to make this simple, and then it started out with something and just stick with it. But I think there are more, you know, as Commissioner Wall mentioned, there are multiple considerations, and I'm okay with working with it a little more.
Commissioner Buckmaster.
I find it somewhat ironic that on some issues, we go, well, come on, we got to trust the staff. In others, we go, we can't trust the staff. So anyway, I trust the staff. I could live with 2 and 9 as well. I can live with 3 and 12. I would like to have, if we have the extraordinary circumstance in phase 1, to not have extraordinary circumstances vested only in the director in phase 2 and 3. Or if we have it in 1 and 2 and don't have it in 3, I think that is an oversight. That if I'm trusting the staff, I certainly trust the director.
How about the rest of you? We want to take a break and we'll work on this language?
Not really, I just want to keep going.
Yeah, I'd rather keep
I would
going.
too. I would rather keep going, and
All
I
right,
do
well,
have
then
a
we
couple
to
other.
resolve it right here.
Well, can we write it up and maybe go to something else quickly?
You've got 3 and 12,
Got it.
and you've got 3 and 9, or 2 and 9, and you've got 2 or 3 commissioners, all with a different view. So,
So, Mr. Chair, you're pretty good at proposing shows of hands. I mean, do you think that maybe something
well,
might help?
let's break it out. I mean, we tried to do it with months, and you had a pretty convincing argument. And maybe 12 months is the thing. Whatever the number is, whether it's 2 or 3, as long as there's the extraordinary circumstances fallback position, maybe that makes the difference between a 2 and a 3 not as important, but I don't know that, so let's talk about it. Holly.
So my thought was, if we do go back to the concept of 2 and 9, 2 by default would be the extreme circumstance, so that would eliminate the need for additional language for emergency situations.
Say that again, Holly, sorry.
By default, two depredations would already be what would constitute an emergency. You'd never have 1 depredation and that be an emergency. But if you had 2 depredation events and our baseline was 3 or more, we would have special language for that emergency of 2 depredations in a short period of time. But if we already said 2 was our bottom line, we wouldn't have to have that extra language for emergencies because it would be covered. Because by default, 2 would be soon enough to allow that analysis of do we want to be lethal or not.
Well, then it would be the same for 3 then, right? Because if we're talking about 20 in an incident. I mean,
Yeah, but if you have 2 incidents of 20 in 3 days and the wolves are still there, that might constitute an emergency. But you're not up to 3, so you're going to tell the rancher he's going to have to wait another day until there's another 20.
Well, that's where the language comes in.
Let me read you the language, and just so you can think about it. Extreme circumstances means 4 or more confirmed incidents of predation of livestock by what ODF&W reasonably believes to be the same wolf or wolves within 7 days. So ODF determines based on evidence it makes publicly available, that there were no intentionally placed or known reasonably accessible unnatural attractants such as bones or carcass piles or disposal sites that contributed to the incidence of depredation, and that non-lethal measures are and will likely remain ineffective.
So we
So-
already have 4 and 7 days where we can declare an emergency and
Well, that's
So this is for phase one,
phase one.
phase
the
for
extreme
phase 1.
circumstances. And so Derek has the simplified language that we had recommended, right, in front of you?
For phase 1.
For phase 2 and 3.
Yeah, so
The
Commissioner
extreme
Buckmaster is
circumstances.
asking why haven't we continued that, or why don't we continue that in phase 3?
Yeah, I was hoping maybe you could just hear it and then decide if you wanted to put that into your consideration. Oh, looks like Kevin might have it.
Yep, it's, you have it ready to go? Okay. Sure. So, this was located, that doesn't matter where it's in the plan. So, this is after we rolled out the idea of 3 and 12. And so Commissioner Atkinson is correct that, you know, that 2, if you lowered that threshold, that 2 would be functionally already covered for those extreme circumstances. If in your mind, though, you're thinking 3 or more. But text we rolled out, this is present in our working copy of the April 2017 draft plan Wolf update, which was basically what we rolled out for the December 2017 meeting. Just ignore all that. So we state, in phase 3, the above numerical criteria for lethal removal of depredating wolves may be changed to 2 confirmed depredations by authorization by the ODFW director in the following situations. Situation 1, in situations of extreme circumstances where evidence exists of immediate ineffectiveness of non-lethal measures, or that the wolf behavior or depredation circumstances indicate that non-lethal measures will be ineffective or are beyond the ability of managers or livestock producers to practically implement. The other situation is specific to private land situations, where the nature of the depredation, for example, the number of killed livestock per incident, the frequency of depredation, and known use of the area, in parentheses, frequency of wolf use of the private lands where depredation occurs, extent of non-lethal measures available, and the proximity to other private properties, residences, and livestock are indicators of an unacceptable situation. So even when there is that escape valve, there were a number of very explicit criteria that it had to be addressed. So summarizing, one is an event where there appears to be just some extreme circumstances. The non-lethal tools have been in place, there's been proactive measures put in place, and you get hit twice in a yet not identified time frame. The other one is a situation specific to private lands. And so that's where that proposal ended.
And that was a 2 and 9 issue, or 3 and 12?
That was under 3 and 12, and it's specific to phase 3 only. So here's the extra level of complication. Phase 2, with even this proposal, would have no escape valve. When we discussed this topic, though, there was at least some agreement by the commission, and I don't mean to tell you what you remember.
Please do.
There was
we're all
the comment or the
exes, unusual.
criticism that while we are proposing chronic to be defined as 3 and 12, why wouldn't we have a time frame on this escape valve as well? And at the very least, the recommendation was, well, let's at least have a 12-month just to duplicate that effort. Because again, oftentimes, as we're experiencing now, some of these numbers may be a bit subjective, and it's a long course of trying to define what time frame is acceptable.
All right.
So I guess I would propose that I would be interested in a 3 and 12 and adding that stopgap for both phase 2 and phase 3. Or my alternative would be 2 and 9 with nothing else.
Let's have some more discussion on Holly's proposal. Bob, you look like you're ready to say
I was
something.
just going to wonder if we could even take a vote on the 2 and 9, the original.
Okay.
Well, we have a motion for 3 and 12, a motion and a second, so unless Greg withdraws it and I withdraw my second, we go back to 0. You want to withdraw it?
No.
Okay. I'll withdraw my second.
Would anyone else like to second?
For 3 and 12?
Greg dies for lack of a second.
Or 3 and 9?
Yes, I would second that.
Would
All
second
right.
for 3 and 9, okay.
So Derek, that language that you read, we just need to, is it the 12? Let's just talk about, we have Eastern Oregon grazing circumstances, we have Western Oregon grazing standards. Do we need a bifurcation, which complicates that? No, so I don't think we do that yet. So just trying to think this through. So what is the number that encompasses the greatest, provides the greatest standardization and fairness to the livestock producer and is the best for wolf management and recovery?
But do you have any comfort level, Derek, with maybe addressing that? Just geographically in the numbers and sizes of ranches, east versus west, and producers' needs for, moving livestock and for feeding requirements, those kind of things, in relation to what the chair has brought up.
Chair Finley, Commissioner Woolley, nothing that it would be easy to point to say, oh yes, there's clearly these regimens that are followed. We are very excited but concerned about what's going to happen as more wolves continue to show up here in Western Oregon. So in some regard, having flexibility to account for those situations is ideal for the long term, or at least this next round of implementation. And fortunately, touching back on the questions before about what does in the area mean, area of depredating wolves, area of known of wolf activity, our use of in the area, which actually we do define in rule, is based on its case-by-case basis on the pattern and the location of depredation events. And so we know that in Western Oregon, when you have smaller land holdings, smaller properties, we could be impacting many more producers versus in Eastern Oregon, you could have that same pattern. It's literally just 1/4 of somebody's property. So I don't know if I'm specifically getting at your request, but I don't know, in some ways there is some flexibility to address this.
Yeah. So it seems to me that the longer grazing seasons occur on the east side versus the west. Is that, no?
No, the opposite.
It's the opposite. Yeah.
Okay, so,
But, okay. And we have the preponderance of our producers on the east side of the state. Would that be correct or no?
No.
No.
I don't know if I want to go there.
No.
I'm not the subject matter. We did do an analysis looking at number of producers, average property sizes, et cetera, when we were evaluating some proposals. But as far as, I don't feel comfortable considering we probably have, better representation here to talk about distribution and
Okay.
densities and perhaps commissioners that can weigh in with some personal experience on conditions.
So I'm just trying to get at what the chair has brought up and is what is, if there was a duration that was proposed, what provides the most benefit to the most producers in our state if we had to choose one duration? I'm just trying to see what's the most fair for the most people, given that it's going to be a compromise for some, that's all.
all right. So the framework, if I had my calculator or my computer, I could do the math between 3 and 9 versus, or 2 and 9 versus 3 and 12. And what is the real
There's no-
difference on the ground and by percentage?
Chair Finley, some of this, When we proposed that original 3 and 12, we took a really hard look at the number of depredating wolves, the rate that they did. And when we proposed that 3 and 12, there was a bit of a drop off at that point that supported that, at least that 3 number. We looked at our data yet again just this winter, and we don't have those nice, neat, obvious, like, oh, here's your cutoff point. With more data, as you get with data, you start to get a smoothing of responses, and there's not a clear, obvious drop-off anymore. So that's where even again, I think some of these concepts of grazing seasons are nicer because they seem to have a little bit more applicability.
Okay, Commissioner Buckmaster.
We have just a reminder, we have a motion and a second on the floor. I will announce that I will vote no on this motion of 3 and 12. Is it 3 and 12 or 3 and 9? Help me.
The second was withdrawn for 3 and 12.
3 and 12 is,
The second was withdrawn.
I withdrew my second.
yeah, but you seconded something, did you not?
I did 3 and 9.
So 3, and you moved 3 and 9? So we
Yes.
do have a motion of
We do.
3 and
I
9.
did switch my
Yes.
motion from 12 to 9.
I will vote no on 3 and 9, but I would vote yes on 3 and 12.
I would vote no on 3 and 9, but I'd vote yes on 2 and 9.
Is there a swing down the line, Mr. Chair?
I'm just trying to find something that's fair to both the livestock producers and palatable to the wolf.
And that's so hard to define because as Derek has been saying, and what's played out in terms of the numbers of complaints that we've addressed, it's been an average of 3 depredations, given the fact that we have these, very occasional big events that can be addressed with this 4 and 7 days caveat that Commissioner Buckmaster has, which we already have in available to act on. So.
Well, only in phase 1.
Director Melcher. We're not going to let you avoid your responsibilities. We would like your comment.
He's really trying to be on the down low here. We should give him a break.
He's basking in the budget for 2 hours, that's all he gets.
Well, I mean, listen, why don't you advise the public and advise the commission on your success on the budget, and then we'll move into finishing off the wolf plan.
Wow, okay.
Okay.
Well, so this morning I did spend the morning over at the Ways and Means Natural Resource, actually not the Natural Resource, the full Ways and Means Committee with Commissioner Labhart as well. And we attended the full session for 2 primary issues, the agency budget, Senate Bill 5510 was up relatively early in the morning, and that budget was approved by the full Ways and Means Committee. As it was approved, as I described to you all over the course of the last 7 days or so. It's a good budget for the agency. It includes an increase in state general fund appropriation of about 18.7%, which is quite a healthy and respectable increase. Increase in lottery funds as well. Overall budget increase of about 8%. An additional roughly 17 new positions in the agency. As was alluded to earlier by, I think, Commissioner Woolley, 3 of those positions are wolf management specialist positions. They'll be located around the state to help with non-lethal deterrence and investigations and a whole host of wolf work. So it's good package, good budget. Lieber Cattery was not part of the budget. I think there's still some discussions going on over there, and we'll see. We won't know whether Lieberg is going to be funded likely until the very end of the session.
Well, congratulations. We know you worked hard on it.
Additionally, House Bill 2829 passed out of the full committee, and that creates the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund, creates a committee to make recommendations to the commission on how to spend the funds that are in that account, and it also includes a special purpose appropriation of $1 million to the account, with the caveat that in order for the agency and the commission to spend that $1 million, we need to generate $1 million in matching private funds. And then once that is achieved, we go back to the E-Board to get position authority and limitation to spend that account.
Well, good job. And while we'd love to let you rest on your laurels,
Could I
you
just go
need
the
to help
budget?
us out of the swamp.
Okay, as long as we're on the budget, or we're on your legislative work, I know that there was another bill pending, and I'm not sure the outcome of it, because it was stalled, to prevent, for lack of a better term, coyote hunting derbies. And I know that that was kind of, I don't know if it was stalled in committee or where that ended up, and so was that discussed again, or did it die, or what happened with it?
No, that was Senate Bill 723, and it was actually up in the full Senate. I want to say it was 2 days ago. It did pass the full Senate. There was quite a bit of discussion and debate, floor discussion, but it did pass. So it's on its way to the House now. So it has to go through, I'm guessing, the House Committee on Rules, and then to the House floor before the end of the session.
Okay, thanks for that update.
Yep.
Okay, now help us out of this with your thoughts and maybe a recommendation.
In terms of the 3 and 12, 2 and 9, well, I think you all have really captured some of the things that we have struggled with. And of course, we liked the 2 and 9 because it was very simple. You did not, from our perspective, you did not have to include special criteria or special authority for the director, because we would never consider one event an emergency. Therefore, it would always be, the second event would always qualify, provided there was all the non-lethal deterrence and all the criteria were met. So the 2 really was simple. We've always felt that there needed to be a time frame, a temporal component, because in the current plan, as was pointed out, it just says 2. It could be 2 depredations in a decade and technically qualify, and we know that that's not appropriate. So we felt that the 2 and 9 was very simple. We originally had proposed the 3 and 12. The 3 and 12 is a little more complicated because we did think that there needed to be perhaps some opportunity for discretion for extreme circumstances. So 2 and 9 doesn't have that. Is simpler. I think the reality is, and we've said it many times, is we've been we've used discretion, and we've looked at, over the course of many requests, we've had many events that qualify for lethal removal, and we have not acted on only but a very small proportion of those qualifying events. We've used, we've done our due diligence. We have not used lethal methods when it wasn't going to solve the problem. For instance, if there were circumstances where the cows were going to come off the grazing allotment or move to a different pasture, we knew that wasn't, lethal wasn't going to solve anything, so we did not implement lethal. So 2 and 9 was a simple approach. 3 and 9, or 3 and 12 is perhaps a closer approximation to what we've done.
That's what I remembered.
Yeah.
Yeah, is what you've done.
Could we have a proposal of 3 depredations in either 3 or 9 months with the discretion of whoever the decision maker is at the time? I'm not clear if it's the commissioner, the director, or whoever, that takes in consideration the specific circumstances. And specific circumstances can be the location, the geographic location, for instance. I mean, so that we've demonstrated that 3 is a more realistic number based on what's actually occurred. We're going back and forth on 9 months and 3 months. the grazing seasons vary geographically and with the species of livestock that we're talking about. Is there a way to incorporate both of those? And then leave it up to that decision point when we make a decision of how to act on whether 9 months is sufficient or if it should be 12 based on the extenuating circumstances.
I don't know if I have, Chair Finley, Commissioner Woolley, I don't know if I have a good answer for that question. I mean, a lot of what we're talking about here is not, it's a judgment call on your behalf. Is the right number 2, is the right number 3? The grazing season, I mean, as you heard discussed earlier, it's not just as simple as east of the Cascades or west of the Cascades. There is a very diverse range of operations, and to lump producers in these broad categories of a 9-month grazing range or 9-month grazing season or 12-month grazing season it's pretty tough. 12 certainly covers, obviously it's a whole year that covers every option or the full range of grazing seasons. So I don't know. I don't have a real good satisfying answer for you. I think it comes down to, do you want to complicate the rules with additional criteria for extenuating circumstances, or do you want to continue with the 2? It has been 2 for, 15 years. All of our wolf populations in the eastern third have been in phase 2 or phase 3 now for, I want to say, 7 or 8 years. It's been 2 for that whole time. So going to 2 with a time frame is not, it's not a liberalization. It truly is providing additional protection consideration.
Okay, was anyone have they rethought their thinking as a result of the director's discussion?
Let's vote.
Well, we do have a motion on the floor, right?
We do.
3 and 9.
Well, let's see where that goes.
Okay.
All right, you want me to call the question?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor for 3 and a second. Let's see, who made the motion? Greg?
I did.
And who seconded? Mary?
I think I did.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, so show your hands. All right, 3. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, so the motion does not carry. 4 to 3.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, make a motion.
I make a motion that we maintain the 2 and 9, and just wanted to say, well, somebody seconds it, I had a comment.
I'll second it.
Okay.
My comment is that since we have had it 2 in the past, it does give discretion to the staff and the agency, and as someone who's been very involved with these depredations and learning from the agency what their decision making is and what decisions they make, I have been very confident that this department is focused on conservation. Time and time again, when they could have gone lethal, they chose not to. And that gave me a lot of confidence that this department primarily is interested in conservation of wolves, number 1. And I really value that discretion for them to be able to do that. And in a way, I'd rather see it be 2 and see them say, no, we're not going to go lethal, than have it be 3 and every single 3 they go lethal. To me, it shows that the department has a greater conservation focus when they choose not to go lethal. So I do like that aspect.
Greg?
So I go back to the department has a discretion anyway. And back in 2005, when it was determined that we would have 2 and 9, we hadn't built up evidence yet of what would actually happen on the ground, or the number of incidents that we would have, and the number of calls that we would get to take action. And the way that's played out, it's been 3. And so I think that, again, we're in 2019 now, we're not in 2005, and I think that our decision should reflect what's occurring now, and what's been occurring in the information, the data that we've accumulated with actual activity, with our producers and our livestock.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. I need hands. All right, so we've got 5. Opposed? Okay, 2. Motion carries.
May I switch gears and make another motion? I have
Yes.
2 things, and I'm
Okay.
sorry for everybody whose time is, we're still talking, but one of them is, and we talked about this early on, my motion would be to add climate change impacts and biodiversity declines as conservation threats in the plan.
Say that again?
My motion would be to add conservation, or climate change impacts and biodiversity declines as conservation threats that we consider. It's in chapter 2, I believe, or 3, I can't remember which. But it's in the plan that we would add those 2 as conservation threats.
I will second that. You have to find the correct place.
All right, further discussion?
Good idea.
It's a good idea, so I'll just call the question. All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye and hold your hands up for me.
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous.
I have one more?
Yes?
Oh, wait,
This-
sorry, can we slow down for a second? That was a motion by Commissioner Wall and
Yes.
and a second by Commissioner Buckmaster.
Yes.
Okay. And do you have the page, just for clarification, the
I-
page?
I don't have the page, but I can find it in a
Okay.
minute. But if we could, just in the interest of time, if I could go on with the
Yes.
next one and say what it is, and then I'll come back to that.
Okay.
Thank you. I'd like to go back to the discussion about controlled take, and it is the definition in the glossary, so it's probably easiest if everybody turns there if they have it. And I would like to move that we add that lethal take of wolves to address ungulate population objectives or herd management goals may only be authorized if the department determines that wolves are the cause of the ungulate population or herd management problems.
There we go.
This is under which definition?
Controlled take. So we have said, we have talked about controlled take and allowing controlled take of wolves if there are these problems. And I would like to clarify that we would only do that lethal take if wolves are determined by the department to be the cause of those problems, either with ungulate population declines or with ungulate herd management problems.
I think we have that language already somewhere, don't we?
They have a different level of it's a different standard, if you will. The page is 106, and it's the first page, well, it's the only page, no, it's the first page of Appendix A, controlled take. The other place to look where this might be easier, actually, is page 31 of the plan. Where it's talking about under what circumstances we would authorize controlled take. We keep in mind that we changed the definition a bit of controlled take, but whether we're looking at Appendix A or on page 31 where we're talking about when we would use controlled take, I think that we should we should be clear that we will only use lethal take of wolves for those 2 problems, ungulate population declines or herd management goal problems, if wolves are determined by the department to be the cause of those problems.
Can you tell us the line number where this change would happen?
I would put it in Appendix A, line 8, well, it would be after line 10. And in page 31, I would have to have the department say exactly how it would play out. But the impact would be, it would be, what is the bar before we will kill wolves for impacts on the ungulate populations?
Yeah, and just to add to that, and I think we were reminded of how some language has shifted over time to be, earlier on, wolves may be, and I'm not phrasing this exactly, but a contributor or a part of a cause or a factor to. Okay, I'm kind of reversing that. I must be getting tired. Anyway,
It's-
I concur with what she's saying, and this goes back to my comment with Derek and all of the evidence that he and the staff have compiled, none of which have concluded in any of the studies and reports that have been compiled over the years that the wolves have been the cause. There have always been a range of factors. There's been kind of conflating, multiplying the effects of other predators, of bad winters and drought and disease and so many other things. And so I agree that that the language should say the cause, and that should be substantiated beyond a shadow of a doubt. Because otherwise we're managing, we had so many pages here.
Well, we don't have a second, Greg. Would you like to second it?
Yes, yeah, I
Okay.
second, because otherwise we're managing,
Been
we're
moved and
managing for
seconded.
hunting. And, as a department, we do that because we promote hunting and angling and that's an important part of our role as well. But absence the evidence that wolves are the primary factor in decline of ungulates, and then we're managing solely for hunter opportunity, and I don't think that's not our main responsibility. So anyway, second, I
All right.
second.
So it's been moved by Commissioner Wall and seconded by Commissioner Woolley. We are having a discussion, so let's continue it. Other commissioners? Commissioner Buckmaster.
I think if we go to using that language, we might as well throw the whole thing out on ungulates because I don't think there'll be. Let me ask Derek, can you ever show, ever, that it is the cause?
Chair Finley, Commissioner Buckmaster, in the world of wildlife biology and management, it is exceptionally difficult to be able to show that there's only one thing at hand. So I don't know if I can directly answer your question, but based on experience, because biological systems are complicated, that's why we have these professions, because this discipline is not black and white.
Do you have any words that you think might move towards Commissioner Wall's objective that are actually achievable?
Like primary cause?
No,
Do we?
that's not.
No, we don't.
Yeah. Chair Finley, Commissioner Buckmaster, I feel like there are multiple options, and I think that was even pointed out in Emmerich letter, is that there has been an evolution of testing out what text is acceptable and gets the intent. Right now, it does say ODFW has determined that wolves are a major cause of the population not meeting established ungulate objectives or herd management goals. Previously, we had a proposal of significant factor. Any of those options, I feel that satisfy that intent, I think are certainly on the table, but I will point out that, again, there is the discretion that it is the commission that approves controlled take. So it would be up to the staff to have to check all of those boxes, and if in a commissioner's mind they are looking for the cause, they'll have that opportunity to test that, to see that the agency has attempted to satisfy and met their expectations, versus understanding, look, there's no way we can rule out and control for weather on impact. There's no way we can control on other factors. And I would say that would be part of that discussion when staff obviously get to the point where they're comfortable with making that proposal. that it would then still take that next level of commission-approved process through a public engagement.
So we have a motion and a second. More discussion, or would you like to vote it up or down? Vote it up and down. Okay. All in favor of the motion, raise your hand. Okay. 3. All against the motion? 2, 3, 4. Motion fails. All right.
Chair Finley?
Yes.
Excuse me, would you like to go?
Yeah, well, I'm going to be making another motion.
I would like the record to reflect who
Amendment.
voted, which way. On that, we need to, with the show of hands, we don't have any indication.
Any name?
Unless we have, I guess,
Okay. So the ayes were Finley, Wall,
Woolley?
thank you.
okay.
Those are the ayes.
Okay. Do you want to make a motion, Greg?
No, I have a recommendation for an amendment, which you had asked me earlier to kind of parse out from an earlier discussion.
Okay,
It's regarding wildlife services.
okay.
So I would like references to wildlife services should be removed as a potential agent for either the identification of confirmation of depredation in the field or as an agent for implementing controlled take of wolves. And again, that's based on not the ability of wildlife services technically or professionally to be able to carry these actions out, but because I feel that there is an inherent conflict of interest with that organization because their sole purpose is to kill animals, and in some instances that can be a useful service, but in this case I feel that with the level of controversy and contention and difficulty with this issue, I think that they should be taken out of the equation.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. Further discussion? All right, call the question.
I think Derek has his hand up there.
Yeah,
Derek.
Chair Finley, I do want to point out that following the state-federal coordination strategy, USDA Wildlife Services has identified in that strategy of assisting in depredation investigations where wolves are federally listed. So I didn't know if that there was a clarification that you're talking about in the delisted part of the state, or because there's already this commitment, and the federal agencies, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service utilizes wildlife services to assist them in those types of things. So I just wanted to clarify that wildlife services has different roles and identified responsibilities based whether it's delisted or not.
Thanks.
So does that change your view, Greg?
Can I ask a follow-up question to Derek? Wouldn't
Yeah,
that
sure.
override, I mean, if we decided to do this, wouldn't the federal statements override that in their area?
Chair Finley, Commissioner Wall, I would believe so. I don't know if there's, I mean, the coordination strategy isn't, I think, legally binding.
Right.
It would just create a little bit of a complexity in that the plan says to not involve them, but yet some other agreement that ODFW is involved with as an appendix in the plan says to work with wildlife services.
And perhaps the way to clear it up is if Commissioner Woolley will accept a friendly amendment that says they have precedents where they control, this is for where they don't. Where we have discretion, this is the route we'll go.
Or they can intervene and override what we
Yeah,
we
because
decide.
they have,
Because
if
they
it's
have-
listed, they
Because
do.
they have some precedent. Yeah.
So what does the motion read like now?
And do you have a page that you're looking at?
No, well,
We're gonna need to be able to recreate this in the edits.
I thought it was. So there is a page 51. Wolf deprivation on livestock may be confirmed by either ODFW or Wildlife Services, which is line 19 and 20. And I'm not,
51.
and I'm not sure exactly where, in terms of authorization of Wildlife Services to be enlisted as agents, I'm not sure where that is also listed along with where we have the public listed. There's another area for phase 3 on page 50, depredation on livestock or wolf livestock conflicts in the area may be confirmed by either ODFW or USDA Wildlife Services. That's for the confirmation part. I'm looking to see this authorization. You know, there's the page 51, control take would be by ODFW special permit authorization for the public, you know, where Commissioner Buckmaster is wanting to take public out of there. Assuming Wildlife Services isn't considered the public, they're considered but they are an agent. So I'm not sure specifically. I was thinking of a kind of a universal delete throughout. And so I'd have to see where it would be inserted. I'm not sure.
Well, shall we table it
Until,
until
yeah,
we'll just,
yeah, okay,
okay.
I'll scan.
All right, so other discussions. I took down some of your interests. We've covered a lot of them, quite frankly. Commissioner Wall, I still have the poll that you listed.
I think you did that already
We did?
when we talked about Commissioner Buckmaster's interest in working on
Okay.
non-lethal measures.
Okay, all righty. Okay, so is there any one of you, Commissioner Buckmaster?
I have one additional thing which may not require any change within the plan, and that is more of a sense of the commission. There have been concerns on both sides, from all sides of the issue about the wildlife compensation, how well it's working. There have been even going so far as some concerns that the system is being gamed. Realizing that this is a Department of Ag program, but also that we do the work prior to them cutting the check. This fits into what I would consider to be a very appropriate candidate for either our internal audit, or if not ours because of its Department of Ag connection, even requesting our director's office to go to DAS, which can go cross-agency. But we don't want to be surprised by problems that would emerge from the compensation program. That's one of those things that fits the criteria of an audit would be a good idea. And we have the tools in the state now. So if there's no objection from other commissioners, I would ask the chair to instruct the director's
Well,
office.
I would,
object.
you object?
It's beyond our area of responsibility to tell another agency what they should do.
But DAS, it is within DAS. And certainly, we can raise the issue that we have a concern. And
I
I
don't
do
have a
as,
concern.
well, I do as a commissioner, and that I would like to, maybe it's a sensitivity of sitting on the internal audit for so long of saying, you know, if this kind of stuff shows up on the front page of the Oregonian, and they say, why weren't they looking at that? We are part and parcel of the program, even though we do not write the check in this Department of Ag. Now, the Department of Ag may say, we don't want to, we don't have to, But my request is that we initiate at least a discussion with DAS and the Department of Ag. And if they say, no, we're not interested, no, that's
Let
fine.
me do this. Director, would you like to talk to your counterpart in ag and just feel them out first?
Well, Mr. Chair, I talk to them all the time,
Yeah.
actually. I think the best, I mean, I think it's fine to highlight this as something that the commission has an interest in, because we do have a nexus. We don't fund it directly, we don't write the checks, but we do the investigations. And so I think maybe the best approach would be to highlight your concerns through our Governor's Natural Resource Office. We're all part of that same program, and then your concerns are shared at that level, and if the Governor's Office shares those concerns, they'll back it down to the other agency, as opposed to coming from this agency to that agency.
Director, I in discussions, worried that I might be stepping on other agency toes. I did mention that in a discussion with the Director's Natural Resource Advisor. He is actually the one who suggested the DAS connection.
Okay.
So I think that maybe will work out for you.
That's not my phone.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, and I,
So we're happy to follow up and try to connect some dots.
Well, what about
I don't
this?
want to
if-
overpromise and make
if-
you
if-
think that somehow I can compel another agency.
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah.
so I also, I don't want to cut you off.
Well, I was
Chair.
just going to say,
Go ahead.
if you feel out your counterpart, and we can always address this in the August meeting. Is that okay with you, Bruce? Do a little spade work
Yeah,
and feel it out.
yeah, and I'm not going to, I know you had the conversation with, I guess, the Natural Resource Policy Director, and you know, the governor called me a couple of days ago, and, well, I don't want to speak for the governor publicly, but my sense is that she is already on board with this, and so, based on our conversation. So we can go back and talk with Ag about this. And, you know, your notion of let's talk with Ag and then see where the governor is, and I feel like I already know, but, you know, if we need to do that process as procedure, you know, that's fine.
Well, we don't need to ruffle feathers unnecessarily, so let's bring it up in August. Is that okay
Yeah.
with you, Bruce? You brought it up?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
You
So,
find it, Greg?
no,
Okay.
it's not, it's assumed, and I haven't seen a line, I haven't seen a page and a line to where it would go, and so I don't know. It's just that they are eligible, and based on, you know, the testimony that we've heard and the concerns of the public, it should come out, but I don't know where.
All right. Any others that we in the round robin that my list is pretty much exhausted, so is there anything else otherwise?
There is another thing.
All right.
So, another concern that's been brought up is trapping and the cruelty aspects of trapping as a tool. And what we have in wolves as a special status game mammal, page 31, lines 38 and 39, 40. In circumstances where controlled take is being implemented, trapping may be used for lethal management control before receiving special permit authorization from ODF&W. Trappers may be approved by ODF&W. And you know, trappers are also on the kind of the hit list of concern. And I would like for trapping to be removed. So take is being implemented, so just that whole section C, you know, I think should be taken out.
On what page, Greg?
That is on page 31, lines 38, 39, and 40.
before we put that into a motion, do you want to do more discussion, or do I hear a second?
Second?
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Now let's discuss it. Commissioner Buckmaster?
This, like the suggestion that the North American model is flawed and should be replaced, is worthy of a full-blown discussion. Trapping, I think, is also, but I look out at the room, I don't see a representation of of that community, their ability to discuss it, whether they should be there. So, as we talk about being able to come back and do that, I would not support this, but be willing to say if we want to address trapping as in the state of Oregon, let's discuss trapping and not come at it from an oblique angle and without everybody with an interest present.
Okay, so the lead-in is in circumstances where controlled take is being implemented, comma, trapping. So controlled take now has to be approved by the commission, correct? Okay, so commission could deny the use of traps at any one time, correct? Okay.
Chair Finley, that is
Can I
correct.
say something?
Yeah.
Yes.
So is there still a need to vote on this?
No, I feel that there should be a note, a vote. I'm not seeing where trapping would be appropriate. I think there's been an argument about non-target animals being caught in traps, about, sustained suffering of animals in traps. I feel that it's an archaic method that is unnecessary.
Okay.
I don't want to get into a whole trapping discussion. We have had trapping discussions in the past around other issues, and that's a whole nother, as you alluded, we're not getting into a universal discussion about trapping or not trapping. We are talking about something that's rather pinpointed. I wouldn't call it oblique. I'd call it specific to the concerns of the public. And it just does not seem like a necessary tool, in my opinion.
Okay, Commissioner Buckmaster.
I would opine that your comments about trapping were in fact comments about trapping. Exactly the kind of comments that I think warrant a full discussion with all interested people present, that we announce it, that we're going to. So if we talk about, we're looking at a controlled take, let's say that is the opportunity to have that discussion, then we say we are going to consider, and we'll consider whether or not trapping would be used, and we do the notification. So all the people, I just think, I understand your position. I'm not sure how much I even disagree with your position. But I think that at some point, the people who are most affected by that need to be in the room.
Okay, and I don't know how far down the road we should go about with this. In our discussions, it was determined that trapping is generally a very part-time income for people that trap these days, and that the beneficiaries of trapping, which is the utilization of the pelt, you go through the supply chain, we're talking about people even outside of the United States that end up paying, $20,000 for a coat. It's not a sustainable industry anymore. Back in the 1700s, fur trapping was, the major industry in the Northwest. Is not anymore. And so we have had trappers in the room in the past during discussions. And we've heard from them, and we know that they would like to continue. It's been a lifestyle for many generations. It's a tradition. It's a heritage of our state. And I would ask you do you feel that it is a humane method of killing animals?
I would like to refer to Derek maybe too. I know exactly what kind of trapping are we talking about? Are we not talking about commercial trappers, right, really doing this, or are we talking about?
It's a controlled take.
Bob, let me just interject. I just want to read this one more time to you. This is the department in determining. This isn't recreational trapping. This is a judgment by the department to use a tool. So I don't disagree with, I think trapping is outlived its real usefulness. But in this case, your motion is to remove section C, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So, Bob, I don't know what it was, but I was hoping that we're going to ask Derek is, under what circumstances would you recommend trapping from the department, now that you have to come to the commission to sell your program?
Chair Finley, the situation is case by case. There are certainly times that trapping would likely be the preferred tool. If you're in a situation where you've got inadequate cover, if you have concerns about the discharge of a firearm, if you have the inability to hunt the animal during the day because they're mostly active at night, you can have traps that are active 24 hours a day. They're doing that work. There's a reason that we trap wolves for research, is because that is a very, very effective tool and many others aren't. I would envision if we came across a situation where we said, you know what, I don't think this is appropriate for a hunt, but to open it up to a controlled hunt through trapping, we would likely instill the use or the requirement that trappers perhaps have to use BMP approved traps. The Association of Fish and Wildlife has a BMP, a Best Management Practices program, that they test all types of traps. They have a gray wolf best management practice document that approves the traps that have been tested for their humaneness, their ability to be effective at capturing their target species, avoid other species. I could have Rob Lynn come up front, and because in that case it is designed just to hold the animal. There's a difference between live traps and kill traps. And we can restrict the use of kill traps to just have live traps only, which gives you the benefit of being selective. And if you do have bycatch, or perhaps you get a pup and the target is perhaps some adult with a broken leg type of situation, that gives that ability to make that decision, rather than arguably times with hunting, you're making a decision at a distance. I could have Rob Lynn come up in our situations of where we are trying to capture wolves to return them, not with any intent of a lethal removal. There are tons of things that can be done to a trap, the design, the set, to be selective, to reduce bycatch, to reduce harm, and we can uphold those same standards to these activities in that commission review process. Most people are very unfamiliar with the high level of complicated regulations when it comes to trapping, on trap size, pan tension, all of these things, attachments, drags, shock springs, swivels, laminated jaws, padded jaws. It goes on and on and on, that from a staff perspective, when we would get to that point in the future, we would be likely laying those things out as, based on this situation, we recommend that these tools are available. We recommend or require that we could have training, we could have to inspect their equipment. We can also dictate trap check times. When we are trapping wolves for research, we have very strict protocols of, we are checking them oftentimes twice a day. Depending on the situation, we might say, this instance, we want a 12-hour trap check, a daily trap check, 24-hour, what have you. And just like our recreational fur harvest, OSP knows how to enforce those types of regulations. So I would envision that we would be utilizing the information that we already implement through our regulations, but perhaps taking it a notch up. And I don't imagine, that's a skill set that most Oregon trappers don't have, because wolves are a different animal, and most don't have the equipment appropriate for that. But that would be part of that decision-making process of, look, this looks like an ideal tool, but we just don't think that there's a deep enough pool to consider it. And that would be that future decision made.
Commissioner Wall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think we're going to finish this conversation today, so what I'd like to do is withdraw my second so we can have the conversation later.
Okay. Is there a second then on Commissioner Woolley's motion? Okay, dies for lack of a second.
I would just say that, you know, with this decision or lack of decision, we're just continuing to put complex decisions onto future commissioners, I think, which is unfortunate, you know, rather than, you know, grappling with things now. And that's, I guess that's just how it is. But that's, you know, I think we're missing some opportunities, and in a range of ways, and it'll just continue to be tough. So.
Okay. Here's what I'm thinking. If you're all satisfied with the amendments that you've approved, then I would look for a motion to say you want to adopt the wolf management, whatever the proper title is, subject to the approved amendments, correct?
Yes. Could we get where Mary wanted the threats inserted before you do that?
Oh, Mary, did you have a threat?
Page?
Well, that's an opening. I'm supposed to find the page number, and I have not done that yet, and I will.
Okay.
That's what you were asking, Deputy Director?
Well, I was reminded that you had still an item of interest.
No, it's already been taken care of. I have to tell you the page number.
Okay, so she's going to tell you the page number. You want to make the motion? Oh, yeah, okay. Do it. All right.
I move to amend OAR Chapter 635, Division 110, as proposed by staff, with the amendments approved by the commission in this session.
Second. So it's been moved by Commissioner Atkinson and seconded by Commissioner Finley. Any further discussion? Okay, I'm going to call the question. All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye and holding up your hands.
Aye.
Aye. Is it, okay. Greg, you're against, nay?
No, I vote no.
Okay. So, it's approved 6-1. Commissioner Woolley voted no. Thank you to audience members. I hope you saw that we addressed as many of your concerns as we could within a day. Can't get them all. We're trying to balance things here. So, I have a couple of things, future business. We're going to have a joint meeting with the Washington Commission on August 1st. Full commission, the Washington Commission is going to join us here. Right, Kurt? In Salem.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about Columbia fisheries management. And Holly, if you're available, we'd like you to come. And I think that's the end of any, does anyone else have some other business? Okay. Nothing for you? Okay.
Does that mean we do not have something on the 2nd then?
We do have our regular commission meeting.
Oh, we have both?
This one, the whole day on the 1st will be devoted to Columbia River's fisheries management with Washington. And then we'll have our regular agenda commission meeting on the 2nd. We're adjourned.
It's time. I agree.
Oh, sorry.